welcome to Lindy's class. It's been a long time since I've been in the room with you. I'm very glad to be here.
We're glad to you to be here.
Thank you. And it's also been a while since we've had class. So we were kind of off our schedule from November, December because of various things. But and then we missed class for the lectureship, which was wonderful. But I think we're back on track now for the second Tuesday, and we're going to pick up in the book that we're studying, The Portrait of God. We're going to cover tonight. We're on chapter 9, and I am ambitiously trying to cover chapters 9 and 10. I'm saying earlier that if we don't pick up the pace in this book, we're going to be doing it till 2030. So, so we need to go a little faster. So I'm going to try to cover chapters 9 and 10. And the period, just so to set, if you haven't had a chance to read chapter 10, that's okay. Or even chapter 9, that's okay. I'll give you a little overview of where we are. So the book that we're studying, for those of you who might be new or those online haven't been keeping up with us, the book is taking us all the way from Genesis to Revelation. And it's really, the theme is how God's character is shown through the scheme of redemption. So all through the scripture, from the introduction of sin to God's promises being introduced in Genesis chapter 3, and then all the way through the Old Testament, how he's carrying out his promises to the people of Israel. And then we'll get into the New Testament. We haven't gotten there yet. But really it's going in the order of the scriptures, not necessarily chronological order, but the order of the scriptures. And right now we're going to turn to Joshua and Judges. So the books for tonight were Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and actually a little bit of First Samuel. So actually, if you were reading, that was a ton of reading. You read the whole thing. But we're covering a specific period in Israel's history. And last time we talked about the Israelites coming up to the land of Canaan. And now in Joshua, what happens in the book of Joshua? Somebody tell me.
The land is divided up.
Yeah. So first they're going to go in, right? They go in and take the land. They conquer it, and then the land gets divided. And then we'll get into Judges. And in Judges, we have certain rulers called judges. We'll do that. But really, it turns out the themes of these books are sort of similar. So here we have Israel coming into the promised land, the land of Canaan. And of course, they came out of Egypt. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Why? Because it was a 40-year trip.
No.
There was not. If you look on a map, it really probably could have taken them a couple of weeks to get up there. But they had to wander because they wouldn't obey.
Right.
They would not obey. And so in the end, the whole generation of people who left Egypt, anyone who was in Egypt and went into the wilderness, died in the wilderness.
That's right.
And now it's the second generation coming into the land of Canaan. And there are a couple of lessons there. We'll talk about that as we go through. But this is a generation that did not witness the events in Egypt, right? All those powerful miracles that God did, but they heard about them.
They knew about them.
They knew about them. And so God set up, when he set up the Passover feast, he made ordinances that they should relay all of the events again. Teach them to your children, write them on your doorposts, right? So that they won't forget. And so they did that enough. I mean, they weren't obedient, but they did convey to the next generation here enough that they did know that it was God who was giving them the land of Canaan. They understood the promise of the land. And there was a distinction in the text that we read about the land promise versus the seed promise, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. But they at least understood the land promise, right? That's our land. They knew they were headed there.
Right.
And Moses dies, and then Joshua becomes the leader. So then all through the book of Joshua, we hear about, I have a picture in my mind of Joshua. Joshua was a faithful man. He was a good leader. He was God's appointed leader. But he made several mistakes throughout the book of Joshua. And so I always think of him like he goes so well, it's going so well, and then he falls. And he tries again. He goes so well, and then he falls. And he makes one consistent mistake through the book of Joshua. It was actually mentioned in the text. I don't know if you remember it. What was it? He forgot to do something.
Yeah. Like they're making decisions.
Yeah. He made decisions without asking the Lord. And the Lord was pretty gracious to him about that. But there were consequences every time, right? When he didn't seek advice and made the wrong decision, then there'd be consequences. They lost a battle or somebody conquered them or whatever it was. So even Joshua, we're going to see, he makes mistakes. And so here we are conquering the land, many battles that we'll talk through here. We get into settling the land. They divide up the land in the last bit of the book, and all of the tribes are given their respective areas. And then when we get into the book of Judges, what's the tone of the people? What does the Bible say in Judges? There's a phrase that comes up a few times in the book of Judges, and the people did
What was right now. Nice.
what was right in their own.
That's like we did today.
Yeah. So, boy, there's a ton of lessons, right? I mean, we'll get there. So, yeah, in Judges, they're willful, and again, we're several years out now, and they keep forgetting that they need to seek the Lord's advice. They're willful. They try to do things on their own. They get a leader, and the leaders aren't all faithful.
No.
And they follow the leaders that aren't faithful, which is really dangerous. That's something for us to think about. But they follow the lead. When they get a new judge and the judge sort of leads them astray, they follow. They're also, one of the things that Joshua, I'm going to use the word failed. That might seem a little harsh, but I'm going to use the word failed. One of the things that Joshua and those who conquered the land of Canaan failed to do was to utterly destroy. That was the phrase that the Lord used, right? Utterly destroy the Canaanites. Tell me about the Canaanites.
They didn't have the Israelites passage, didn't they? To go across their land.
They did. They allowed them to come in. Were they good guys or bad guys?
Bad guys. They became enemies to them because they were fighting. God said because of the fact that they did not utterly destroy them, that they were going to be like a sore spot.
That's right. Yeah.
To them.
Yeah.
A thorn in, I can't remember, thorn something.
Yes.
A thorn in the side of something.
Something like that.
On
Yeah.
your flesh.
Something like that. So yeah, so the issue was, they in Joshua chapter 7, there was an alliance made. Joshua decided these people seemed nice. Turns out they were deceiving Joshua. They said, "Oh, we've come from a far land." Well, they didn't. They only came from next door. And so Joshua made an alliance. Didn't ask God about it, but already made the alliance. And it turns out they were Canaanites. Well, here's the story about the Canaanites. The Canaanites, I mean, these were people, going back, years back. Abraham and his family had left Canaan long ago. And now it's been 400 something years that they were in Egypt, and now they're headed back to Canaan. So in those 400 years, the land was settled by idolatrous nations, wicked nations, child sacrifice, sexual offerings at the temples to their idols. I mean, and you name it.
It said that they
were doing it.
rejected idols to every element, including the stars, the moon, anything of the earth.
That's right. They worshipped almost anything, right? Wicked people. And so by Joshua, and he did it a couple of times, there were a couple of places where he made some alliances that he shouldn't have made. And they allowed people to stay in the land of Canaan. Well, now in the book of Judges, years later, you know people, you're their neighbors, they intermarry even.
Yes.
And now you've got this interesting mix of religion and the influence. And you can see, all the way back in Genesis, you can see some of the influence of marriages. I think Esau, really, where Esau married Canaanite women and wasn't faithful, right? That's a key, what's the word? Factor in having a faithful life. If you're married to someone who's not faithful, maybe there's someone in this room who's married to someone who's not faithful. I mean, that's a challenge, right? That's a challenge. There are times I can tell you being married to someone faithful that you go through ups and downs in a marriage. Sometimes that's all you got is that you share your faith.
Right. I was just going to say that's challenging enough, but then
That's
to
right.
marry someone who's not faithful,
That's right.
and oftentimes you find yourself yielding to them.
It's easier to compromise, right? You
Yes.
want to keep the peace, and the
Mhm.
children are torn. I mean, it's just tough. So that's where we are in the book of Judges. We had all of the Israelites who settled the land, their God-given land, and now they've intermarried with the Canaanites, and they're struggling. It's hard for them to stay faithful, and God tells them all through, if you had just got rid of the Canaanites, it would be a lot easier for you. But they didn't, and so that was the situation. All right. So before we dive into some of the details, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. By the end of the book of Judges, and by the way, Judges, if you have never read Judges,
Oh, yes.
as a doozy, right?
Yes.
I always
Yes.
tell like the teenage kids, like, that's a good book to read. Like,
It is.
it's interesting. It's a page turner. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Each one of those characters.
Yes.
Each one of
It's
those
like a soap
characters.
opera. It is.
True story. to tell.
No, that's right. It is. And I mean, there's violence.
Mhm.
You name it. It's interesting reading. But anyway, by the time we get to the end of the book of Judges, what are the people of Israel demanding? Saying, we want a king. We want to be like
All the
other
nations.
nations, right? So here we are. There's that influence. Now, God does work with them. We'll get to that. But we're going to end with the last judge, who is Samuel. And that's as far as we'll try to get to. So, all right. One of the things that I think was really compelling about the way he told these chapters, he relayed these chapters, was if you think about Canaan, Canaan was a gift, right? It was a gift from God.
Right.
And, from way back, it was promised first to Abraham, right? I'm going to give you a land. I'll make you a big nation, and through your seed, all the nations will be blessed. But he told Abraham he's going to give him this land. So that was a long time ago. From where I'm standing in the book of Judges, way back to Abraham. Hundreds of years have passed. But Moses said at the very beginning here, Moses told them, everything God has promised you will come to pass. He said, that that's true. So that's an interesting lesson. I want us to kind of think about the gift of Canaan from all different sides. Because if you think about it as maybe a type or an allegory, if you will, of our own salvation, right?
Mhm.
We're headed to our own promised land right now, right? The promises of God come in God's time, right? Abraham didn't even live to see it, but was God still faithful?
Yes. Yes.
So, just as a point of encouragement, right? If you're thinking about the promises of God, I think sometimes, here, I'll speak to myself. Sometimes the days are long, and it feels like it's the struggle worth it, or is God really watching? Is God really going to take care? Is God really watching over me and my family? Is he really, if there's an issue in a congregation, does God see that? Does he?
Yeah. Yes, he does.
It's a silly question, right? We know the answer. It's not a silly question. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to feel that, right? But think about the land of Canaan, when it was promised, and how long that thing took to come to fruition. It was generations, and they had to stay focused on it. They had to recognize that it was coming. They had to believe in the promises of God. And it did come true. In fact, all of the promises that God made, so all through the scriptures, right? That's a great study as to how God. But when you think about just Canaan, especially as it relates to our own salvation, it's coming. It's coming. Promised. It's coming. So that's comforting, I think, when you look back and see the Israelites. And boy, they struggled with it, right? They struggled to remember it, and they had to go and get it. So here's another thing. Canaan belongs to God. He gave it to Abraham. Abraham lived there for a minute and left. His family left. They were constantly kind of going back and forth, right? Back to, go get a wife from your family back in Ur of the Chaldees and then bring them back. And now they're in Egypt going back. So there's a lot of traveling around. But all along, the the land of Canaan, even though it was occupied by other people, belonged to the Israelites. But what did they have to do to get it?
Work.
Oh, work. Action. I mean, so this is interesting, right? And I was like,
Faith, though. It's faith. It's work. You have to.
what's the difference between faith and work?
Show me your faith without work, and I'll show you my faith by my work.
This is a beautiful illustration. I think not just for us facing our own journey to the promised land. That's one thing we can take from it, right? One lesson we can take from it. It's also, if you're talking to somebody who does not believe that you can do any works to earn your salvation, and you can't earn your salvation, who believes in faith alone. Let me say that. If you're talking to someone who believes in faith alone, all I have to do is believe, and the gift is mine. This is a good example, right? This gift, and it's a gift, and it was free to them. In fact, God said, you'll go in and settle in houses you didn't build and take from fields you didn't plant, right? That's a gift. But what do they have to do to get it?
They had to go. God said go, so you had to go.
Yeah.
That action.
We talked about this a little bit when we were talking about spies. Go in, right? Go in and just look at it. Just to look at it, they struggled with, but they had to go do it. Well, now here we are in Joshua. And, Moses has died. Joshua's been appointed. The baton is passed. They have a great leader. Chapter 1, such an encouragement, right? God chooses Joshua and tells him over and over. In fact, he says it 3 separate times. Be strong and courageous. Strong and very courageous. Only be strong and of good courage, right? So I'm giving you this land. But so they cross over. They had to cross a river. What river? Jordan. So interestingly, what happened to that river when they crossed over? It's hard. Yeah. That ring a bell? Somewhat like the Red Sea, right? So here's God calling them back to this, like, remember, I rescued you once. And I don't know if we're not going to do this tonight, just in the interest of time. Go back and read Exodus 14, 15 is where Moses sings his song after they cross. So 13, 14. When they faced the Red Sea, they said, what, weren't there any graves in Egypt?
Yeah, looking back. Yes.
Yeah. And here's the army coming. And Moses said, watch. And he said, and be quiet and hold your tongue and watch. That's right. And watch, right? He says, hold your tongue. I complain.
Patient people.
Yeah. But, anyway, so here we are. The Red Sea is crossing the Jordan. The Jordan opens up and they cross again on dry land. Really just as a reminder, right? Here's God showing them again, because this is a different generation, right? These people were not there. They heard about it. They weren't there. Now they've seen it with their own eyes. They walk across dry land with their own feet. And shouldn't that be an encouragement? It should. We're going to get to a guy that didn't quite take it that way. Okay. But that's okay. So they go in and, they couldn't just walk in and settle in the houses, right? There were people there. They have to fight. So a lot of times God throughout the book really delivers them. And in fact, the book that they're reading made a reference to Jericho. And I forget how he says it. It's like how do you say that? It's a weird way to conquer. The antithesis of, how do you say it? Hold on, let me find it. The way that he had them conquer Jericho is it's weird. What did he do? How did he make them conquer Jericho? What did they have to do? March around it, right? 6 days. Yeah, here it is. God's instructions regarding Israel's victory over Jericho was the antithesis of human wisdom. The antithesis, the opposite of human wisdom. Human wisdom would have prepared a battle, gotten your weapons out, and been ready to conquer. That's not what they did, right? They had to march around the city. And then on the 7th day, they marched 7 times. They blew the trumpets. And what happened to the walls?
The walls came
The walls
tumbling down.
fell.
And the historian said it fell in a way that they can just step up.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. And it fell kind of in an unnatural way,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
To have fallen that way. Had they battered down the walls, it would have been a different way. So yeah, so God did that for them sometimes. Other times he had them actually go and fight. They had to fight a battle.
Mhm.
But they had to do it according to God's plan. So they had to actually go in and forcefully take this gift. Is it still a gift?
Yes.
Yeah.
Still free?
Yes.
Still
Absolutely.
given to them by God's grace?
Yes. Because
But
remember, they
because
weren't fighting alone.
they weren't
No,
no, they weren't alone.
Right.
And first of all, they knew they weren't going to die because
Right.
God has already told them that this is. So why would God,
Yeah.
give it to you and then
That's right.
if they die, then they don't.
Yeah, they rested in that maybe a little too much as the years go on,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing's going to happen to us. We're God's people, but they had to stay faithful. So that, and which is maybe the next point.
Mm.
And you can see the parallels, right? You can see the parallels for salvation. That it's not just that you're like, okay, I'm going to sit and wait, right? Sometimes you have to go take it. You have to go. There's things you got to do. The gift of salvation. I mean, there are steps that God has laid out that people must follow in order to have the salvation that he's promised. One of which is baptism. I'm going to just mention that because a lot of times people who believe that all you have to do is believe, they don't see the parallel there. This is still a free gift. Just because you had to take some action and make it happen doesn't mean you earned it or that God wasn't with you or that wasn't God's grace that gave it to you. But it's also a lesson for us as we strive on the way, right? There are times when you've really got to fight to do what's right. You've got to maintain your strength in order to pursue your salvation. And we'll talk a little bit about some mistakes that people make, which are okay. Mistakes are okay, but you really do have to focus on getting to the promised land. And then you said something that I was just going to pick up on. It's okay. Oh, it was staying faithful. So once they got to the promised land and they settled, that was the period going from Joshua into Judges when they were wicked. And during that time and even into the Kings, God kept telling them, you have to obey. If you just listen to my commands, if you just keep my ordinances that I gave you, all will be well with you. But they didn't. And so they constantly had battles with their neighbors, people trying to take the land back. They had struggles even amongst themselves, right?
Yes.
Their own tribes. They
Yes.
fought and warred and they couldn't
Yeah.
have peace. As we get into the Kings, there's even more of that, to the point that God finally takes them out of Canaan's land, right? Not tonight's chapters, but he will take them out. So this idea of, once you're in Canaan's land, you had to stay faithful, right? It wasn't just you put your feet up and let it ride. You had to stay faithful to God in order to keep that promised land. So just again, kind of the parallels to our own salvation.
Right.
You have to stay faithful.
Unto death.
You have to stay faithful. Now, and I don't mean to say that you can't make a mistake, because I already mentioned some of Joshua's mistakes, and I won't hit them all because they'll take some time, but just if you want to note them, chapter 7, chapter 9, and chapter 10 are all places where Joshua made a mistake. And it's the same mistake each time, but it had kind of different results each time. Where he really he did not make the effort to rid Canaan of all of the Canaanites. He did not utterly destroy. He made alliances and so forth. Those are good things to look at. But Joshua is still faithful, right? Joshua was still faithful to God. I think that's something I made a note in my book as I was reading, when it comes to the nature of God here. God set up the plan of salvation. I'm going to use that phrase, the plan of salvation for Joseph's descendants, Jacob's descendants coming out of Egypt well before they were actually doing it, right? He knew what their plan was going to be. He was going to rescue them. That word came to my mind a lot. So here's God's grace making this plan that is going to be carried out. So God's character, the book even started with this, the character of God, his grace, his mercy, his patience, his long suffering, right? The Lord is gracious. I will say that to my boys. The Lord is gracious. He recognizes, one of my favorite passages. He knows our frame, that we are but what? Dust. He made us out of dust. Right? He recognizes that about us. He has compassion on us because of that. He knows that we're contained in this jar of clay, he calls it in one place, right? We're weak. We have weaknesses. He knows that about us. But at the same time, he has justice and holiness, righteousness, and even anger. And at one point in the book, it talked about, in the book of Judges, it talks about God being angry. And sometimes it says his anger is hot. Can you imagine? Think about that for a minute. The Lord, not just being angry with you, but his anger is hot. But he allowed them to come back to him, even then, right? Even when his anger was hot, he did allow them to come back. So there's this balance, and the book points out it's always perfectly balanced. He always has just enough patience until he's had enough, and then you have to enact justice. The example that was given was when Abraham was begging on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay?
Yeah.
And it was an interesting way that he phrased it.
Stop with 10 and go.
Yeah. And like when I read that passage, I always wonder, I don't know if I would have gone back times, right? He went back a few times, full 50 and 40 and 30.
All the way down to 10.
Well, what about 10? And God graciously, God knew exactly how many people there were, right? He knew exactly how many people there were, and there weren't 10. There was Lot's family. That was it. So Abraham somehow knew to stop, right? That was the balance. God has all this graciousness, but at some point, God needed justice out of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was wicked. And so there was a point where he couldn't go beyond. And so that's sort of the balance. I think it's sometimes hard for us to know where that balance is, except that he has given us instructions in his word, right? So what I wrote down about God's nature, really thinking about this, like the idea that in Joshua and Judges, we're really talking about sin and the consequences. That's sort of the theme of both Joshua and Judges, right? You're going in to get the land. They fail. They fail. They fail. There's sin. There's consequences. This idea that God is, this is what I wrote in my book. God is. Recognize that God is. So God is called the great
I am.
Right? Even in English, that's the being verb, right? The verb to be. He is. That's a powerful thing to think about. He's there. He is. He has always been. There's no beginning. There's no end. He is. Out of that flows his nature, or if you will, his character, the things that we're talking about, his mercy, his justice, his love, his long suffering, his compassion, his patience, his righteousness, his anger. All of those things are because he is. And that's the nature that he has. Because of that, there are things he's demanded of us. And I think the fundamental gap there is when you don't just accept that God's law is right because God is, period. If you can accept that, then reading his word and understanding his commands and taking it on becomes way easier than if you're, why does he want me? No,
Why are you questioning the great I am?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I said so.
It's not even that he said so. It's not he is.
He is. He is.
Period. Right. So this idea, God has, therefore God has man. I actually wrote this little argument down, but God is. God's nature comes out of that being. Therefore, God has demands of man, and man has to submit.
He does not owe us an explanation. But man wants to.
Minute minds.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I wanted what I
Those
wanted.
specific
So,
things. That's right. Those were talked about in the book, right? Where there's self-will, they're doing things, they walk by sight. It's two things. They walk by sight and their self-will. So what I find really interesting, and I mean, this is another lesson for us. Turn over to Joshua 10. It's Achan, wherever it is. Yeah, Joshua 7. Joshua 7.
So, yeah, he's in 7.
Yep, 7. This is the first time that Joshua does not seek God's counsel for how to deal with this situation. But here we are. They go up in chapter 7. They've been winning all their battles. They're all excited. They're taking the land. Everything's going great. And then they get to this little town of Ai. And if you've ever read anything about Ai, it's a teeny weeny little town. It's set up on a hill. This should not have been a challenge for the army of Israel, right? And they knew it.
And they said that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we'll take this. This is no problem. So they go, and it says the men of Ai struck down 36 men, for they chased them before the gate as far as Shevarim, this is verse 5, and struck them down on the descent. Therefore the hearts of the people melted and became like water. So here they are. This is supposed to be easy, right? And they go to this battle. It reminds me of my son when he's like, this team is going to be easy to beat in soccer, and then they get creamed. Don't get too comfy. You got to be careful. You still have to play your best. So the same idea here, right? They thought, no problem. And they lost 36 men. And it says the hearts of the people melted and became like wax, like water. So they're very down about this. Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So anyway, he's asking God what happened. And so, God says, didn't I tell you that if someone took anything of the spoils, it would not go well with you? This is chapter 7, kind of 10 following. And so they figure out that it's Achan. Achan wasn't that much things he took. Let's see. Hold on. Where did we get to?
No,
Yeah.
garments and silk.
Verse 21. Yep. And he says, I've sinned. They figured out who it was. I've sinned. He says, verse 21, I saw among the spoils a beautiful Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels. Not much, enough he could put in his pocket, right? He wouldn't have to get a big bag and carry all that. Just few things no one would even know.
That's what he thought.
So little things. Yep. I coveted them and I took them. And there they are, hidden in the earth in the midst of my tent. All right. So what happens to Achan?
Him and his family, and it was all stone.
They were swallowed up, right? Swallowed up. Yep. And they had to stone. They had to stone them, which is in and of itself is kind of a difficult thing to think about, right? Can you imagine?
But the thing about the stories that you read in the Old Testament is that they're just like us.
Yes.
We because we have the ability, we have the smarts.
Yeah.
We accomplish things that we want to accomplish. We do the things go on, and we look at that and say,
Yeah.
We look at that and say, because we forget at times, even though we're regular servants of God, there are times as human beings, we forget there is no I in us because we don't do anything on our own. We think we do. We have that false hope of thinking that we can do that. But when it boils down, you have to really look at the fact that you where you are because of God,
Right.
Yeah, not because of the I. Because I had nothing to do with it.
And I mean, you excellent points. So I'm actually going to read you this section from the book on page 107 in the book. If you want to talk, go read it with me, where it talks about Achan's sin. And I thought this was really interesting. I made the note. Consider this in the context of your own
I
sin.
think with Janet's.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually going to read 2 paragraphs. Oh, don't run out of time.
That was just fun.
Shocker. All right. It says at the bottom, the last paragraph on bottom of page 107, Achan's sin was committed with considerable knowledge of God's nature, will, and way. He surely had been well taught concerning God's relationship with humanity from the beginning. He doubtless knew about the flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, other expressions of God's perfect holiness and justice and acts of judgment in response to sin. He certainly had full knowledge of the history of his own people, their slavery in Egypt, and God's mighty works from Egypt onward. He realized that Israel's sin cost her a 40-year delay in reaching Canaan and converted the wilderness into a vast graveyard. He could testify that every funeral in the wilderness of those numbered for war was the direct result of noncompliance with the will of God. He had eaten the manna from heaven, observed God's presence in the guiding light of the cloud by day and fire by night, and witnessed God's miraculous preservation of their raiment in the wilderness. He had walked through the divided waters of the Jordan on dry land. Achan had heard the sermon that Moses preached on the east side of the Jordan, that powerful plea from heaven through Moses, the purpose of which was to prevent the very kind of thing of which he was now guilty, was less than 2 months in the past. He knew that the curse of God would afflict him and the nation if he violated God's will with regard to the consecrated things of Jericho. In the very process of stealing from the treasury of the Lord, he was standing in the midst of the rubble of the mighty walls of Jericho, evidence of the infinite power of God. I mean, that's a powerful way to write that, right? One would do well to reflect upon these matters when tempted to view God's judgment upon Achan and his family as exceeding the bounds of divine justice. So was God fair in dealing with Achan?
Yes.
The note I made there is consider that like every one of us has sinned. Do we know all those things? Yeah, we know all that.
God doesn't.
And way more, right? Think about the promises in the New Testament, Jesus coming. And we still, right? The gap is not recognizing God is, God's nature. I submit. That's it. That's the gap. And we've all done it. We have all done it in spite of knowing all of that. And we look at him and like, that was dumb. I mean, it was dumb, right? It was dumb.
Point out other people's mistakes.
It's easy to point out others. Right. So that's the lesson for us, right? Think about, the way to do that is always to keep those things in your mind, right? You have to kind of keep God's presence in front of you. But all right, let's see if we can go about. We're not going to get through all this. We never do. Let's see. Gift we talked about. Yeah, there's also a reference here to God's mighty works. I think it was actually in the chapter on Judges that he talked about, all of this evidence, some of what we just read, right? The things that God did, the works God did to rescue the people. And he continued to do them at every battle and all of the things that he gave signs to Joshua, all of these things. God was clearly present with them, right? And I remember one time seeing, are you all familiar with the name Richard Dawkins? He's an atheist, very famous atheist, maybe in the early 2000s. He wrote a book, The God Delusion. It was a popular book. He's an atheist. And somebody asked him one time, I just sense chills up my spine when I hear him say it. Somebody asked him one time if, to people who believe there's a God, like things you're saying are horrible, right? They're horrible. What would you say to a God? Like, what if there is a God? What would you say to it if you met it? And Richard Dawkins thought for a minute and he said, I would say, sir, show yourself. That's what he would say to God.
But he has been.
It takes your breath away, doesn't it?
He would say to God, show yourself.
Yeah.
Instead of.
Once you understand the works of God and God's character and all
all of it's around. You can't miss it.
And you can't miss it. It's it's just I can't even fathom saying such a thing, but what a sad state
it is,
right? Not to see. We can see it. We can see it. And so those are all things to consider, especially in this paragraph about Achan, right? Think about that the next time you're tempted to do something that's not right.
Some people are like that if they can't see it.
Yeah.
But your heart, you can't see it. You can't see your oxygen.
And with your reason, you
must hear it.
Yes.
But you don't believe what you're breathing. You can't see what you're breathing.
Right.
No,
but you can't know love. You can't.
But I was just
that day.
Like, but in all fairness, there are a lot of situations and a lot of people thinking on those lines. A lot of people are not taught. God is not taught.
No, that's right. That's right.
They're ignorant to what he
It's
is,
ignorance. That's
and
right.
to the fact that it's like the Indians. They worship the stars, the moons, and everything else. But if no one ever points out to you these things, you don't know. So you form your own opinion, or you form the opinion of the people who are around you.
That's right.
And the people you associate with, they're the ones who are influencing you in these thinkings.
Yes, right.
So a lot of people just don't know
They don't know. Yeah.
until
It's
someone
sad.
comes along and exposes it to them.
That's right.
That goes back again to the lady that sued and won to take prayer out of schools.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And her son one of them became a priest or something, you know.
Madeline Murray O'Hara.
Yes.
In the 70s.
Yeah, one of her sons, well, both of them later came to believe that there is a God. But I mean, as children, and you got your mother telling you
Yeah.
that, there is no God. Well, who would not believe their mother?
Right.
Well, a lot of times you find people who have had tragedies in their life. I had one guy to tell me one time that he didn't believe in God because he said his mother, to him, was a saint. She never did anything wrong.
See?
Now, this is his thoughts.
Right.
And I wanted to ask him at the time, well, where were you when she was a child? You weren't even here. You don't know what kind of life she had. But he prayed and asked God to save his mother from dying. And since it didn't happen and she died, he turned his back on God. But, this is the way people think.
Yeah.
Ignorance is
No, that's right.
it's not it's not bliss.
No, that's right. That's right. No, and I mean, it's something to be thankful for, right? So that been shown the truth, like which is compelling when you think about share the truth with other people, because people are in the dark for sure.
Yes.
Let's talk for just a minute. So much for Judges. We're not going to do 2 chapters. But I do want to mention in the book of Joshua, there is one bright light, and actually across Joshua Judges, there are 2 bright lights. In addition to Joshua, you have to take Joshua.
Chapter 24 is one of them.
Oh, which one? What is happening in chapter 24?
As for me,
Yes. No, that's right. Joshua for sure is a bright light. But there are 2 women in this story.
Rahab.
And then in the period of the Judges, not in the book of Judges, but during the period of the Judges, we have Ruth.
Yes.
And so I wanted to take we'll take the last few minutes here and talk about Rahab, and maybe we'll get to Ruth. Oh well. I knew that within, but so Rahab, tell me about Rahab. Who is Rahab? Where did she live? Jericho. She lived in the walls of Jericho.
She was a harlot. She was a
harlot. So not a very nice woman, right? She was sinful. She was a Canaanite, and I mentioned before all of the ways of Canaanites. That's how she was brought up, and so that's how she lived, right? So in there are 3 New Testament passages about Rahab that I'd like to read, and then also the passages in Joshua 2 and also Joshua 6. So can I assign some verses and we'll read?
Okay.
Joshua 2 verse 9. Let's start there. I'm going to assign them and then we'll read them. Just read verse 9 and we'll talk about the context in a minute. Then in verse 6, we'll read, or chapter 6, sorry. In my Bible, I had it marked. 25, chapter 6, verse 25. Then I need Hebrews 11:31. Somebody taking all these. Who wants to read Joshua 2:9?
Okay, well, I'm here.
All right, you can read that one. How about Joshua 6:20? Whatever you just said.
6:25.
All right. Okay. All right. And then how about Matthew 1:5? And then I need Hebrews 11:31. Matthew 1:5. Mom, Hebrews 11:31.
Okay.
And then I'll get James 2:25. All right. So let's start in Joshua. Joshua 2 verse 9. And we'll talk about the context.
And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is falling upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you.
All right. So she's talking to the spies.
Yes.
She was going to hide them right? Come on
Right.
in and hide and on my roof. And why was she doing this?
She had heard.
Knew. I love
She
that.
had heard.
Yeah.
So, she's listening to the news in Jericho, right? And the news is saying stuff is happening in the desert.
But not
Stuff is going on.
not only did she hear,
She
Heard.
believed.
Believed
She
it.
believed.
She said she knew. Right?
Yes.
She had heard what was happening
Yeah.
and all of the mighty works, and the whole town is afraid because of this God that is
Yeah.
coming. Right? I know that your God is the God. She heard the mighty works and believed.
Yeah. Even in 10, when she heard, she didn't just hear, she heard what happened.
Right.
Yeah. She heard, and yeah.
They were afraid, right? And she knew. All right. In 6:20, well, whatever it said,
6:25.
6.
That's the say we have the harlot alive in her father's household and all that he had, and she dwelled in Israel, even unto this day, because she hid the messengers which Joshua sent to spy on Jericho.
All right. So she was rescued.
Yes.
So they gave her instructions: bring your family into your house, put the cord in the window. They knew where she was. They rescued her. And so God saved her alive, even though she had some issues, right? Number one, she had a problem with the way she was living. And she was a Canaanite, and I think all the religious debauchery that came with that. She also, while she was hiding the spies, people came to her house. And what did she do? When they came and said, "Do you have the men here?" What did she do?
Said, so.
No, she said no.
It's about the wrong way.
So was that?
She told a good lie.
Now hold on. So is lying right? No. I mean, the book went through like lots of passages, right? There are passages all.
Thou shalt not lie.
You can't lie. And I go,
People
God.
weren't doing it what was right then anyway.
No,
Not everyone was doing it.
Yeah, well, that's not always a good reason either. So she made some mistakes, right? She was not perfect. But was she commended for lying? We're going to read it. Hebrews 11. Who has Hebrews 11:31?
I do.
You read it.
Okay, by faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace.
Okay, and mine says James 2:25. Similarly, likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them on her way? So she was not commended for lying.
No.
She was commended for acting on her faith, right? She knew God was going to rescue them, and she did something about it. Now, she didn't do it perfectly, and I think this is a great example of God can use anything,
Yeah.
right? And God had compassion on her and was gracious to her because of her faith. But there's more. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you also have to look at her lifestyle.
Right.
That's the kind of life she led.
No, that's right. That's right. She was, that was not unusual for her.
No, that was not. That's a natural thing to do.
It doesn't make her right.
No.
But
Right.
you're right. That's just a line of that's what she decided to do.
Right.
She
But
was
one thing
commended for
about
acting.
Rahab, she wasn't one of God's people. So she didn't grow up with the statutes
That's right.
that Joshua
That's
and the rest of the people. But from what she heard, it made her want to know more
More about it.
and to believe that
Yeah.
whatever it was about them,
Yep.
there was something pretty special.
In fact, your verse said she lived where? In Israel.
Right.
She lived in Israel.
So she was around it all the time.
She was around it. Let's read Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. You all know all this, but I think it's really cool.
And Salmon begot Boaz of Rahab, and Boaz begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot Jesse.
Hey,
There you go.
this is the genealogy of Jesus
Right.
in
Yes.
Matthew chapter 1.
Yeah.
And here we have, so Salmon, if you back up a little, in verse 2, we have verse 3, Judah. So here we are. It ends up that Rahab marries into the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
And who was her son?
But
Boaz.
Boy.
Boaz, but Boaz here. That would have
No.
been Ruth's husband.
Ruth's husband.
And Boaz are Ruth and Rahab are related.
Mhm.
Okay. Eventually. Ruth will marry Boaz eventually. And here we have, so Rahab has Boaz. Boaz marries Ruth. They have Obed. Obed has Jesse. Jesse has David. And it goes all the way down to the lineage of Christ. So here we have two Gentile women. Talking
Yes,
about
yeah.
Ruth, right? So Gentile women that had faith, that had
Faith.
they had faith. In
Yeah.
fact, Rahab is commended for having more faith than the Israelites, right? The Israelites were terrified to go in.
True.
And she was like, come on, I'm going with God, right? So, all right, we're going to stop there. We did not get into Judges, but I wanted to go into Rahab. I'm also going to put, there's a great article. Rahab comes up quite a bit if you're studying with somebody. People have trouble with, well, was she commended for lying? She was not commended for lying. She was commended for hiding the spies. But she
Pretend to look at the wrong thing.
no.
That's the man.
It's like, hey, it's
Abraham.
Oh,
But the thing is, people judge you based on the human side of people.
Yeah.
And we're looking in the scriptures here, we're looking at spiritual side.
right. Yes.
Because it says by faith. And we
Yeah.
tend to look at the wrong thing anyway. Because I'm serious, they're focusing, you got a group focusing on the fact that she lied. Look what the result was from her. She was hiding these.
That's right.
If she had told those people that, they would have been killed.
You're right.
And her
Right.
too,
No, that's
because
right.
they were in her.
God can use anything, right?
Yes.
Think about the wickedness of killing the Savior.
Right.
Exactly.
That was wicked.
Right.
Mhm.
And you
But
and,
it's not son, right?
and look at what Paul said about his life and what he used to do and how
Yeah.
bad he was.
No,
I mean, you know,
that's right.
if you judge people based on what they're doing, what you actually see,
Yeah.
it's one thing, but people forget
Yeah.
you're a human being.
Yeah.
It may be you, somebody else today, but it may be you tomorrow.
No, it is going to be
Yeah,
tomorrow.
you know, right.
There's no maybe.
Yeah, you. But
Yeah.
it's not saying you exempt for anything because everybody is accused of all of these things. Everyone has done it.
Right.
It's not.
That's
what
right.
you say.
I mean, all have sinned, right? We've all sinned.
All sinned.
If we don't say we have no sin, we're lying.
Right.
John
That's
wrote.
right.
So these are all, I just want us to take these little moments, right? This is not justifying sin. It's not saying, well, this was okay because it wasn't okay.
Okay.
But God was gracious to her. And I'm quite sure, now, the Bible doesn't tell us specifically. It does say she lived in Israel. We know she married into the tribe of Judah. I'm pretty sure she heard about lying being wrong, right? At some point. So she learned God's will
Right.
as she got older, but it started with believing his works, right? She believed his works and she trusted that he was going to save. So, all right, we'll stop